Thank you for accepting to actually come and speak to us this morning.
Anytime.
Now, of course, we've been talking to you over the phone a number of times that we've spoken with you. We are discussing, before we actually come to talk about the Senate and all, we are discussing NHIF. You've seen, of course, what NHIF said,
Yes.
The new regulations. What is your immediate reaction to that?
I'm appalled. I think there is a huge disconnect between government policies. It's as if we have two different arms of government, because you cannot legalize polygamy in this country, yet discriminate. It's just so wrong. You cannot come in and say that one wife, 5 children. You see, we are living as if we are living in a different world. We are not living in Kenya. What happened to someone who has 7 kids? So you discriminate the other 2 kids? I think there's something seriously wrong with us legislators, and I can say that. And the problem is this. The framers of the Constitution, when they were trying to divide the roles between the 2 houses of Parliament, they were very gracious to the House of Representatives or the National Assembly in terms of giving them so much powers. And the Senate was not given a lot. And when you look at the trend, a lot of my colleagues in the National Assemblies do not even read the legislation proposals which are brought before them. I heard recently some of them complaining about the 3% turnover tax. And, I was just like, listen, this was in the finance bill.
And they passed it.
And you passed it. It doesn't come to the Senate. And this is why we're saying this all nonsense about BBI should be looking at all these issues. There's no piece of legislation which should only be the prerogative of one house. It has to be any piece of legislation. It must go, after it has been passed by the House of Representatives of the National Assembly, it must go to the Senate for it to, before it goes into the President. And also, currently the way it is that the National Assembly has got original jurisdictions on legislation. We want the same in the Senate. If we cannot be discriminatory, and that's the reason why we're having all these problems.
Well, I hear us saying essentially is that these, because we asked the question, today is the 10th of January, and this is when it's now being made to the public, just about NHIF, for example. And of course, then we're being given the details that this was actually, it is not a conversation that was had this year. It was not plans that were made this year.
A board meeting happened last year.
A board meeting happened last year. Plans and things were put into place. And then the people for whom the bulk of the responsibility lies for the enactment of this thing, they are the ones who are going to drive this. The information then is shared with them at a later date. What are we doing? And then for us to hear that these things are read, the people who, of course, the onus then lies upon them to legislate, they know this beforehand, and it is theirs. The responsibility is with them for the protection of the people. So what are we doing, honestly? And then the question is, why then do we have legislators in place who are not there to protect the people?
I think civic education is very important. And I think listeners out there must also take a proactive approach in understanding their role in terms of building a nation. This is political science 101. I'm sure you've heard there's no taxation without representation. But also, I would add that you also must be able to be proactive and say, what is in it in me? What can I do? To be able to ensure that whoever I'm electing to go and represent me fully understand my problems. There's a huge disconnect. And this disconnect is fueled by the fact that during an election cycle, what really take precedence is the amount of money that you can give the voters.
And tribe and clan.
And tribe and clan. I have to say that I come from a school of thoughts, or a people, actually, who elected me, not because of the money that I gave them, because I didn't give them any, but because they believed in me. Because, Eric, I can tell you this. I come from a very, very small clan. If I was to depend on my clan to elect me,
you would never be a cattle dip chairman.
I would never be a cattle dip chairman, to tell you the truth. So I hope that whatever happened to me would be able to
Can be replicated
to
around
be
the country.
replicated across the country. And then people are elected because of what they are able to deliver, but not because of the clan they come from. You know, and that is the reason why I really don't care about what you say. I care about what the people are benefiting. That's why whenever I'm fighting on an issue, I am not a sycophant of anyone. You know, I totally believe that I represent the people of Narok, and that's what I want to do.
Right. Well, we're looking with NHIF, and we talked the KRA turnover tax that was announced to us on Monday, and now within the same week, Friday, now we have announcement coming from NHIF. I wouldn't be surprised if next Monday we have something coming out of NSSF, and then maybe on Thursday we have something coming out of the Ministry for Transport. You know, it wouldn't be surprising to me in any way whatsoever. And I think, unfortunately, the people are beginning to expect bad news. And again, even more unfortunately, is that we really can't do anything about this. They're not going to overturn their decision.
No, you must understand. We must raise money because we need money to govern the to run the country.
If
right?
that is the
We
case,
have
then
got
the
debts
same
to pay,
the same
and this is
NHIF
what's
that we're
happening.
talking about is being rocked in 2019.
Eric, did
2019,
we suddenly,
which was
Eric, did we suddenly acquire this debt?
leave Eric.
No,
wait.
no. We
10
didn't suddenly acquire it. But
10 billion shillings is the scandal that is still being investigated within the same NHIF. And we're not talking about 10 years ago, 2019, which was literally 10 days ago. That's what we're talking about. 10 billion shillings cannot be accounted for within the same fund that is now coming to people today and telling them that we're going to ask for your money upfront and then not provide you with medical services.
it's a big issue. I think the issue of NHIF will continue to see what happens and how it breaks down, and NHIF needs to come out and explain exactly what this is. We have the Senator for Narok, Ledama Olekina, who's just joined us. We're going to have a conversation with him in the next hour. First, let's take a look at traffic, and then, of course, as we continue the conversation with the Senator, we'll ask you to join in and join the conversation on our social media platforms, and at some point call in 0719 012 600. Good morning, this is a Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation at 8 o'clock.
Spice up your life.
All right, it's slow but moving right around Mufaiga, trying to gain a thicker road. But unfortunately, getting onto thicker road is bumper to bumper right around the NYS traffic headquarters. Literally a parking lot this morning. It is Friday. We've come to the end of the week, but that means that we are seeing traffic absolutely bouncing back to normal. Red Hill Road runs from Limuru Road near Village Market to Gashie, and we see quite a lot of traffic from there as well, trying to get into the city centre. So that's not happening this morning, unfortunately. Coming off Mombasa Road inbound to the city, we have quite a clog up right around Cabanas and then going all the way stretch past General Motors and of course the IDC. All right, getting off Waiyaki Way is a jam all the way from the Safaricom headquarters all the way down into the city centre. So we're looking at traffic hour right now, and it's not likely to phase off for another 30 minutes or so. So sit tight. Let us know if you find an alternative route that we can share. Keep people moving this Friday morning. 0719 012 600.
What's the status of the horse? Or was it one of those stories?
Well,
It
we haven't heard any if pigs fly, if horses fly in this case. Maybe we'll get the tax overturned. We'll wait and see. But for now, all news about the horse is that it's still there. Let's see.
So in the 5 minutes that our guest has spoken this morning, he has already given us his slant of the conversation. He's already said the National Assembly, short of calling them inept, basically.
No, they are.
There you go. So
Now
not
that we
short.
have that out of the way.
All right. So National Assembly inept, BBI nonsense.
Yes.
We talk about
Legislators who
legislators who
read.
can't and don't read. We're talking about also the voters who do not think and scrutinize the people that are going into the election. Okay, so we already know where you stand. Now let's start with, where do we start? Start with the BBI. Let's start with BBI. Why is it nonsense, Senator?
You know, they always say you preach. Do you preach water and you drink wine?
Drink wine, yes.
That's exactly what is happening. If we care about inclusivity in this country, if we care about not equity, but what is the other thing of equity? Anyway, it will come to my mind.
Distribution of resources,
Not
for
even
example?
no. I mean, if you care about trying to to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor, because we can never achieve equity in this country. There's no way we can achieve equity in this country. Eric, you and I can never be equal.
Yeah.
My sister from Nigeria, Kenyan by birth, by right, you and I can never be equal. But there is a form of acceptable way of us saying, okay, since we come from different areas, we can share the cake equally somehow. So there is equity versus equality. Equity was the word that I was looking for. If you look at the current president, he is preaching BBI. My party leader is preaching BBI. But if you look at the way the appointments in this government are being distributed, they are all skewed towards one ethnic group, but not even one ethnic group, one elite society. It's an elite group of people who happen to come from one particular ethnic group.
The elite now, and also they are of the same tribe.
Elite.
You did notice that when Mheshimiwa said group, he looked at me.
No. I was looking at you so that I can be able to be sure that I'm looking at all the three of you. I'm sitting in a position where I have to turn left, right, and center. But let me
so there's equity. There's equity in your focus.
So there's equity. In my focus.
Right.
And
there's no
equality. Of focus.
There's no equality, but there's some form of equity.
Right.
Yes.
So the problem is this: if the president and my party leader did care so much about this equity, they would have ensured that not a single ethnic group of people complain that we are being left out, that we are being treated as guests. What transpired during the launch of the BBI, to me, was utter discrimination.
What transpired that made
because
you say this?
I'll put it this way. Let me put it this way. If we are talking about, and I love what my colleague in the Senate, Senator Orengo said. He said that he has never felt Kenya in one roof like the way he felt that day. But the problem was that the people who even spoke did not represent Kenya. Kenya is a community of 44 different ethnic groups. Why didn't we see that? Why do we see...
You wanted to have 44 people speaking.
You know what? Like I said, Eric, we cannot have equity,
yes.
but we cannot have equality, but we can have some form of equity. You cannot have 3 people from one ethnic groups, another 3 people from another ethnic groups representing this so-called Kenya. Why didn't they have somebody from a minority group talking?
What's a minority group?
Minority group are people like us, the Maasais. Okay, we bring billions of dollars into this country just because of our name. That's number one. Why didn't they have a Turkana speaking? Turkana is now bringing billions, or it has got the potential of bringing billions of dollars into this country. And there are people who have always felt like they don't belong to Kenya. The only reason why someone like, what's his name? Even Dwale spoke is because of his position. We cannot have people from one region, Mount Kenya, and Western Kenya speak. And Eastern Kenya. The reason why people like Kalonzo Musyoka spoke is because of he was part of NASA. So really, in my view, even from what my colleague in the Senate spoke about recently in one of the locals television stations, saying that there is this team of experts which has already been chosen. My question is this BBI being run by a small clique so they decide these are the people we're going to have in the... we're talking about inclusivity here.
May I ask a question,
Yes.
Mheshimiwa?
Yes,
Do you have issues with the content of the messaging that was that we heard at the launch of the BBI, or is it the optics?
I think I have an issue with both, because when you look at the content, it does not represent our views.
So are you saying that people from these minority groups did not
Were not
participate
consulted?
in this gathering of data or
I
information?
like
that
your
formed?
question. We did, but
Yes.
what came out does not represent that.
Meaning what they reported as having come out from those regions
It's
is
not what
not
was said.
what was actually
It is not
said.
what was said.
Everybody's
If you open that
views,
page, let me-
Senator,
I keep
everybody's
saying-
views were not included. In fact, we even had the Secretary
I'm
General of
glad you said
ODM,
that.
Secretary General of your own party said some of what the party presented is actually not contained in the BBI report.
So why bring in a report that doesn't take in
It's about
issues?
harmonization.
No, it's
of-
not about
of- of
harmonization.
views
Eric,
and
I can
seeing
tell you what it
what
is.
carries the day as well. How many more people have gone with this certain view? view than yours.
You know what?
must
I
agree to
like
that.
your line of arguments. Present it to us. Show it to us. Tell us we went to 47 counties. Remember, Eric, in fact, that day when I gave my views, I had a bill that I had to move in the afternoon. And I realized that if I drive to Narok, because these guys went to Narok for 1 day, and they listened to the people for 1 day. For how many hours? 6 hours. 6 hours is when they sat there and listened. So I did my calculation and I said, look, I must give my views. This is the only opportunity that I have. If I drive down to Narok, because of our corruption, we've not been able to finish a faster road to Narok. We've got this one route that goes to Naivasha, where every time I spend like 6 or 7 hours stuck in my Mahiu.
Just going down the escarpment.
Just going down the escarpment. So what did I do? I decided to go into my savings and I hired a chopper to go to Narok so that I can be able to do my civic duty. I can be able to represent and then also come back and move my bill in the Senate in that afternoon because I didn't want it to lapse. I went there. My brother, I read the BBI report. It never talked about the issues of land rights for the Maasais. Okay? Not even Maasais, for Kenyans, the issues of land rights. It didn't talk about that. Then what are we doing? You know, why do we keep on saying we care about this group of people, we care about this group of people?
How many points did you present when you made your presentation?
I spoke for half an hour.
And how many points did you have? There was, of course, the issue
I dealt with the issues of 9 issues. The 9 I submitted on the 9 points that BBI was. You know, I was very specific on each and every point on what my views are as the elected leader of the Maasais. You know, I was speaking on my behalf and on behalf of my people because they sent me to the Senate to be able to represent their views. I was shocked. In fact, when I read the report, what came to mind was a Ndongo report, number 1, the TGRC report. Okay? Nothing is implemented. In fact, what the report did very effectively was to remind us Kenyans of everything that ails us. Okay? It talked about women being given this, women being given this. It talks about the problem. In fact, if you read the language, sometimes you might even ask yourself, who is this person writing this? You know? I mean, seriously, some of the words used were so casual. I wish I had the report here. I'd read for you some words which were used there. They were so casual. If you talk about the views of the 47 counties, I'm so glad we have a researcher in the house. When you carry out research, before you come out and give your recommendation, you must give your observations. And you say, 47 counties, Nairobi County, on the 9 issues, this and this and this is what we observed. In Narok County, this and this and this is what we observed.
Right.
These are our recommendations as per what we observed on all these counties. We do not have that for us to be able to come up with an educated, you know, decision in terms of moving. Finally,
because we can't see what they gathered from across the county, we are not sure how they arrived at the final report.
Yes, that's number
unlike what happened, for example, with the committee of experts and the Guy Commission,
yes,
where we have the data.
We have the data
from the ground.
Yes.
So this is one of the faults that you have.
That's one. That's number 1. Number 2 also, and I think I explained this clearly recently in a local television station, is that there was a problem with the disconnect in terms of our generations. I think the 3 of us here come from one generation. We are what is referred to as a Generation X. My brother here could be a baby boomer. Okay? We have,
right.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, he's right.
You know, we have,
right.
and he comes from the same generation as our president. Our prime minister comes from the generation of traditionalists. About 60% of Kenyans are millennials. None of them were represented. Their views were not represented. You know, I find it very difficult sometimes even to have a discussion with my kids at home because I'm busy here working, maybe amassing some wealth for them, but they don't give a hoot in hell about it. You know, they're like, Dad, that's
not
yours.
their issue.
You know, we want to do something different. It would have been fair for Kenyans and also for this big generation if they were part and parcel of this BBI BBI, what do you call it?
But I thought the discussions around the BBI were open to everyone. Or were they deliberately excluded from these discussions?
Can I tell you something?
Before you do that, Senator, in a joinder to that question, because we asked these questions at that time and we were told that yes, there was quite a lot of public participation that took place, going round and round. So at that point, is it something that would have then been raised at that point? Because now then it's concluded, the report is out, and then it would be seen to be that
No,
no.
It's not concluded.
Well, it's not concluded.
No,
but
let's put it this way.
if one stage of it is done, one stage has been completed, isn't it? So then it seems that now what is being raised obviously is not going to be revisited.
Both of you have asked a very good question, and I'm going to try and bring it together. Number one, where I fault the appointment of the people who were to serve as the board. What are they called?
The task force.
The task force. Mm-hmm. First of all, it doesn't matter what views the millennials present. The task force members, if they are not made up of a millennial, when they retreat to go and write their report,
the millennials are not represented.
They are not represented. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we're in a very different era. Okay? I respect our people very well. I respect our elders very well. I have a lot of respect for them. But take it from me. Life is not what it used to be when they were growing up. Things are different.
Times have changed.
Times have changed. And in fact, if you take my brother now to the shopping mall and you take a millennial, he will end up sitting down. The millennial will walk the whole day. He'll probably end up buying maybe 2 or 3 suits. The millennial will probably come back with maybe a pair of headphones.
Only.
Yeah. Or maybe they'll come back with a big bag of clothes because things are different. So really, you cannot tell us that you want to leave this world a better place than you found it. Yet, there's a huge disconnect.
So are we telling a different story? Are we giving out a different narrative? Because if we look at the BBI and what it was all about inclusivity and cohesion.
It's not inclusive.
So we're saying it is the opposite. It is actually not the case.
Are you saying the BBI is window dressing?
I wouldn't use that word. What I would say is this. It is a high time that all Kenyans should critique it
Ask
thoroughly.
questions.
Okay? Apply the parity principle, the 80-20 rule. If they agree with it, I think that's what the framers of the Constitution argued that they did for the current Constitution, which I don't see anything wrong with it. It's just a matter of implementation. Currently, Kenyans should not just take what they're given. They should scrutinize it and say, how is this going to better this country when I'm not there? It is not about me. It's not about Olekina. It is about the future generation. So the question is, ask yourself, where do you come from? I come from a people who have been, stigmatized, extremist measures in terms of their culture. Last week, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, I visited the Narok prisons. And what I saw there, nearly made me cry. There was a woman who is around 89 years old, a man who is around maybe 90 years old, or maybe the other way around. They're both blind. They were arrested because one of their in-laws sent them their daughter to come and help them fetch water. But it was interpreted as if it was forced marriage. That now this girl was being sent for this blind 90-year-old man to marry. That to me just showed that we are talking so much about a modern culture, yet what is moving this country forward is a traditionalist, is a traditional culture. Look at the BBI, the
what
people
is the
who are set
traditional
up.
culture in that case?
The traditional culture is this. In my community, the Maasai, which I think, Eric, you're quite familiar, is that there's nothing wrong with an elder or a father sending their daughter or their son to help their in-laws in need. But the way it was interpreted.
But that help, brother, is not about marriage.
No, it wasn't about marriage.
It's not going to end up in marriage.
Because if it was marriage, why arrest the 89-year-old woman? What part is she going to play in terms of that marriage?
Well, let me then ask this question, because when one talks of marriage of underage girls, a lot of the information that hits the media seems to come from the community and communities, pastoral communities that you come from. Comment about it.
I'll tell you something. I have rescued and educated over 25,000 girls.
Rescued from?
From forced marriages, from, let's go...
FGM, possibly.
Okay. I set a period of 10 years for me to do that work. And after 10 years, I quit. And that's what I did. I did it from 2005, from 2000 to which year?
To 2010.
2010. And the reason why I stopped is because I was doing it out of my heart, and I really cared about the people that I was doing. But then this thing became commercialized. So what is happening now is that, to answer your question, is that some people are taking advantage of the dollars which are coming from foreign countries or from human rights groups. You know? And instead of doing what is right, they continue fueling this theory that so long as you send a child...
Essentially rent-seeking.
They're rent-seeking, period. Okay? And that's why I stopped, because I was literally... There was a time I stayed at the Hilton Hotel for literally 2 months. And the reason why I stayed there is because I had an office. You know? I was not sleeping. I was driving every single day to villages to pick girls who had been sent home because they could not pay for school fees and take them to schools. But then after that, I realized that even the people who were coming to me to support them, they had enough money.
They're also in business.
They are in business. So even more, seriously, you know. But listen, we cannot, and to end this discussion of the BBI, if I can tell you this, given that now it's been given another leaf, I think it's about time that this committee of experts or the task force to really sit down and say, what are these critics saying about this?
So they should
if
be
we
listening
care
to people.
So they should be listening to
they should be
people.
listening to us.
They should be going around the country. Now they're the ones who should
Don't
be going
rush
around
it.
the country.
Don't rush it. Don't put a deadline. Okay, if you come to Narok has six constituencies. If you are spending money because you are given money to spend, find a way to be able to get a representation of people to come in there and sit down with them and say, this is the report we have. These are the views we collected from Narok on how you want BBI to become inclusive. This is the report we came out with. We realized that maybe, where can you tell us, where did we go wrong?
Yeah.
Let's correct it. Because I'm all about inclusivity. I'm all about equity. But let's not preach water and drink wine.
Right.
We're still talking about equity and what you're calling inequality in the society. Well, we have in the studio this morning on the hot seat, Narok Senator Ledama Olekina. He's come out guns blazing. He's called the BBI nonsense. He has also said the National Assembly is inept. He has not told us anything about the Senate. We'll ask him what he thinks about the Senate, the other members of the Senate, apart from the Honorable Senator from Narok, and then we'll also tell him what we think about the Senator from Narok, probably, by allowing you to call in on 0719-012-600. It's 22 minutes past 8 o'clock. The conversation continues. Of course, you can post your comments as we progress with the discussions on our social media platforms. Spice FM KE Facebook, at Spice FM KE on Twitter. Good morning.
.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Now, Senator, the way you've been talking lately, of course, you've been raising the issue. And in fact, you even brought it up this morning. You've talked about appointments to public service. You've talked about representation of the people and the communities around the country and saying we have 44 communities in the country. Why don't we feel like all the 44 are represented? And then when you talk about your own people of Narok County, you speak of them as if they are just one community. Why is that? I mean, I'm sure there are more than there's more than one community in Narok County
Represented, yeah.
represented by their senator.
Narok County has got almost all the 40, let's say, not 44, but probably 42 ethnic groups.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone is welcome to Narok. What I do not welcome, and I'll be very blunt about this, is taking advantage of a community. One of my biggest pet
What do you
peeves-
mean? What do you mean by taking advantage?
That's
Mheshimiwa?
exactly what I'm saying.
Yes.
One of my biggest pet peeves is where people sit down together, they conspire to deprive a community its wealth. We are people who are very poor and very welcoming. We used to be very rich, but because of the destruction of our environment, we are now very, very poor.
The destruction of this environment, was it something that was created, or is it something that
It's
happened
man-made.
naturally? Was
It's
Can you give us
man-made.
insights into that?
Yeah.
Because what we're looking at then is basically we're saying that there was man-made destruction to deliberately take wealth out of the hands of the people of Narok.
conspiratorial.
Yeah, essentially, that's
and
what
the
we're
Maasai
saying.
community
Some of
were not
it,
involved.
I'll put it this way. No, the Maasai were involved. The Maasai are involved. I'm not saying they're not involved.
Okay.
One of the biggest challenge we have is that when you have an overall government policy that tends to widen the gap between the rich and the poorer becomes poorer. Narok was a very rich county, extremely rich. If you look at the Mau Forest, beautiful. But we ourselves, some of us, the Maasais, conspired with other people who were in the former government of Moi, and they started destroying the forest. They started logging, heavy logging, like what is happening in the rainforest. That brought in poverty in Narok. When that brought poverty in Narok, when you look at the size of cows that the Maasais had, it started sort of like shrinking. Instead of having like 1,000 cows now because you don't have any more land to graze them on or any more vegetation, you start now selling to a point where you only have 10 or 20. Then now you are left with land. Remember, Maasai land ownership came in as a result of group ranches.
Yep.
When you subdivide these group ranches, there's the issue of zoning. It is quite silent. But this is one of the things that has impoverished the Maasai community now. You come to where we subdivided the land, like where I come from, Olompokishi Group Ranch. Every member got about anywhere between 50 and 100 acres. That was subdivided as agricultural land. But then people come in to buy that land. And what do? Gerrymandering. What do? They move in populations there illegally. They subdivide that land, and instead of seeking approval from the authorities, they now say plots. A piece of land which was sold for 20,000 shillings an acre because it was agricultural is now subdivided. 1 acre is divided into 6 or 8 plots, each one sold at 300,000 shillings. The Maasai can no longer live there.
So
Now, let me finish. The reason why we subdivided the land and gave about 40, 50 acres per person is because we were very careful in trying to understand what are the resources which are there which will be able to support these 20 or 30 acres of land. Our river streams, cannot be able to support a population of about 1,000 people in an area. They can support 100 people. But now, what you're doing is that you're increasing the population in the area, you're destroying the environment. The rivers, people start doing irrigation along the rivers. Everyone who buys a piece of land next to the river, start irrigating in that piece of land. Then the people downstream end up, their cows dying, they end up not having water. Then it brings in conflict.
So what's your beef here?
My beef is number one. The people who are coming there, they're not coming there with good intentions. They're coming there to buy land cheap, 20,000 shillings an acre, subdivide it, sell it at 100 or 200,000 shillings a plot.
How is that a bad intention?
Okay, it is a bad intention because if you want it to be a good intention, number one, don't buy it cheap, sell it expensive. That's number one. Number two, follow the due process of the law.
So are they going against the law by doing this?
Yes, they're breaching the law.
They're breaching the law.
They're breaching the law because there's something called a change of user.
So the land is earmarked as agricultural land.
It is agricultural land.
Why then don't we see any kind of action being taken by the same law?
The reason why we don't see is because of what we talked about, people not understanding what the law says. People not bothering, legislators not bothering to demystify.
But there's a public official somewhere.
That public official is in the pocket of those people.
And there's a land board somewhere. There's a land committee somewhere.
I agree.
So all these things, as you're talking about, let's start from at the point where there's a 50-acre piece of land.
Yes.
And it's owned, of course, by somebody who's a member of the group ranch. So let's say this is a Maasai elder.
Yes.
Sells this land to somebody who has come in. And you're saying that these are people who are coming in.
Yes.
So it's not selling to a neighbor.
No.
So it's selling to somebody who has come in.
Yes.
The person who's coming is basically looking for land.
Yes.
And for whatever reason.
Willing buyer,
willing buyer,
seller.
willing
I agree
seller.
with you.
And the land is earmarked for agriculture,
Yes, I
so
agree
you
with
cut
you.
off 10 acres and sell to this person. The reason why they decide they want to sell, they don't necessarily want to sell it as commercial. They're selling as
Agricultural land.
agricultural land.
Yes.
So still selling these 10 acres and subdividing it still as agricultural land.
Yes.
At the point where you want to convert this into commercial, you go and seek consent. Approval from authorities. If those authorities are giving you the approval, why do you have beef with a person who is actually bought the land and selling and not the government?
Because the approval is not only sought from the approving authorities, it is sought from your neighbors. You've got to be able to put up a notice there and say, we intend. There's something called a caveat emptor.
Yep.
We intend to change the use of this property from agricultural to commercial. That's number one. Agricultural land is on a lease, is on a freehold. Commercial properties or commercial land is on leasehold. So you need to go through that. And let me tell you what I'm doing now. I am doing a serious audit of all the land that has been sold in Narok as agricultural land and converted into commercial land, because the people are suffering. Even the people who are buying that land are not getting the services that they require. They are not getting electricity there, you know. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but this is something we should do it together so that we can be able to ensure that the people downstream don't suffer. And you will find that because of the geographical setup of the area, a lot of people who have the beautiful land is normally uphill.
Yep.
Downhill, it's trash. It's nothing. You know?
It's not as good as up there.
No, it is not. So I think it's about time now that we need to sit down and really come up with serious government policy. And I hope that the government is listening. Because the problem we have is not the people. It's not the people who are coming up with those problems. It is the government. It is those people, those authority people, those people in, what do you call it? The land control board.
In the land control boards.
The people in the county governments.
Yep.
Okay? We really need to be disciplined. Discipline is what we lack in this country. You know, if today Senator Olekina wants to buy a piece of land, you know, I go, and because I'm a senator, what do? I seek for a special land board consent. You know, that land board consent is done. Special.
You get your...
Olekina tomorrow gets his piece of land. And then I come back. I bought it with the intention of subdividing it into 100 plots.
If I hear you correctly, Mheshimiwa, you are advocating for protecting your community.
I must do that.
Yes.
But I'm also advocating for protecting Kenyans. I have no problem with you coming to buy land there.
Okay.
But buy land there and come in and reach that neighborhood.
And be clear about your
and
intentions.
be clear about your interest.
Saying.
Not
so you're saying
actually,
the declaration of interest and intention
Yes.
is something that
You must declare.
I made a
is
statement,
pivotal to this.
and I was actually going to add a little beef to it. Why is it not possible for the very thing that you're saying to be stated upfront for people who actually intend to buy land? Why do I say this?
Let me answer that, please.
Yes.
Allow me to answer that. You know, there is a very big gap between, or rather, there is a thin line between the modern world and the traditional land or world. A Maasai man who is my neighbor, who has never gone to school, has no clue about land use policy. He has no clue.
Mm-hmm.
Very few of them have. Very few of them have. In fact, the generation that has that, part of them are the ones who went to school are the traditionalists and a few baby boomers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And some of them might be so desperate that they just want money to be able to offset their bills that they would not say, now I'm selling you this piece of land.
Tell me why you want to buy it.
Tell me why you want to buy it.
All right.
Or these are the conditions of you buying it.
Is it possible that also the person who's coming to buy is in the same bus?
True.
That they
Very
are not
possible.
aware about
They're
all
not
these
aware
things, the
about
land
this.
policies and all. They just see what's happening around the country, that you buy land, you sell, you subdivide land, you
Absolutely.
sell.
Absolutely.
You buy land, you bring in your people, you live in that land,
Yes.
and then you sell off a bit of that land to your neighbors. Right?
It's
So
very,
the
very
issue
true.
here is about awareness, like I hear you saying. It's about people being made aware that this is how we should continue living. So I'm going back to that point of, yes, you're saying you need to protect your community, but why not just say you need to protect your constituents? Because this person who's
My
come to buy
community
from,
is my constituents.
this person who's come to buy from
The fact
Olekina,
that my dear sister comes from Nigeria, the moment she becomes my neighbor,
She's
she
a-
becomes my community.
I
Okay?
see.
So I'm not looking at her now as a Nigerian. I will look at her as my sister, my community. That's what I'm looking at.
Okay. Good point. We have Senator Ledama Olekina in the studio this morning. We will open up the phone lines at about 8:45, 0719 012 600. But in the meantime, let's take a look at what's happening on the roads and then continue the conversation with the good senator. Good morning.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Traffic.
All right, folks, let's see how things have changed or remained the same. There seems to be some madness. The Muthangari, Gitanga, and Othaya Gitanga junctions around Awings, Kodek, Olodume junction as well. Yes, schools are open, and the traffic that is there keeps you right around that area for about 45 minutes. Before then, you now either need to join going to Westlands or join getting on to Ngong Road. So it's quite an issue this morning, and everybody's asking questions. How are we going to get out? Well, there are some police trying to conduct traffic around the Gitanga Road area, so hopefully that will open up soon. Thika Road is, of course, giving us some problems this morning right around Allsops and then leading into the city centre. That'll open up in a short while. Outer Ring, Juja exit also is chock-a-blocked right about now. The Southern Bypass, not so bad as an alternative to get off of Mombasa Road, which is bumper to bumper this morning. All right, apart from that, everything else seems to be okay. Coming off of Langata Road, not too much problem. A little bit of traffic at the roundabout before you join Bagathi Way or on towards Nyayo Stadium roundabout. Looks good in the city this morning. People going to get where they're going eventually. See something out of the ordinary? Do let us know. The number to call is 0719 012 600 or tweet us, SpiceFM KE.
Kenya's biggest conversation every weekday, Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. In the room this morning, Eric Latif, CT Muga Nduoko. On the hot seat is Narok Senator Ledama Olekina, who we've been talking to him, of course, over the last couple of weeks on the phone. He calls in and contributes to our discussions. And we told him, please come so we can have a full hour of conversations with you. One of the first times that we spoke with you, Senator, you were raising the issue of the appointment at Kenya Pipeline. Now, of course, we've seen that the matter has gone to court. The new MD who had been appointed has not taken office. The acting MD's tenure has expired. Are you the one who took this case to court like you had promised?
We've got two cases in court. One of them, my case, we're still doing discoveries. Because whenever you take a matter to court, you've got to be able to present your evidence in a sound manner, because the judge will make a determination based on the evidence that you submit. Our matter should be filed this coming week because we are almost through with our discoveries. That's number one. Number two, there is another case which was filed by Okiya Omtata, and I'm sure it's been supported by a few people. And we might find a way to bring the two cases together. We are looking at two different issues in terms of the cases. There is the issue of inclusivity. There is the issue of conflict of interest. You know, my case is looking at the issue of, one, inclusivity, and also, to some extent, the issue of conflict of interest. I may not want to speak a lot about the facts that we intend to present to court because we don't want to be prejudiced. So we'll shave that to the point where we have the matter in court. But this is a matter that we will not allow to rest.
You will push it to the logical conclusion.
To the logical conclusion.
Now let's talk about the Senate, because the other time we were talking about how the senators are behaving. Now, of course, this is 7 years of experiencing the Senate.
What do you mean how senators are behaving?
Elaborate. The last time we called you, it was asking you about the two senators and how they were going to represent.
We talked about my colleagues.
How they were representing Governor Mike Sonko
as
lawyers. And of course, we'll discuss about that shortly. But now, let's talk about the two houses of Parliament. We have the National Assembly, which we are used to. Of course, those of us in this generation, C.T. Muga knows about the other time when there were two houses of Parliament. Now we are back to those two.
It looks like you want to ask about World War II.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. At this point,
I wasn't alive then. Yes.
Who killed Hitler? All right. The two houses of Parliament.
Was he ever killed?
There you go.
You know, I think he probably died in Argentina.
Probably.
You need to read a book called Grey Wolf by my good friend Jared Williams. Then you might have a different...
some conspiracy theory that comes up there.
Yeah.
The Senate. Is it important? Do we need a Senate in this country?
Absolutely.
Looking at, we called it the Nyumba ya Wazee. In fact, the person who was
not.
calling it Nyumba ya Wazee was the previous members of the National Assembly. They were saying this, looking at them, is as people who have served in this National Assembly
Eric
for
said
long.
the Senate
Eric,
is
the
moribund.
question I
Don't get
want to add
offended.
to you-
It's not about age.
No, age, if you remain alive, you might actually get to my age. So that's not really a problem.
If I remain, I will get to it.
Well,
What do you mean by that?
You actually can't get older if you're dead. So you actually need,
You need to remain alive and you will
yes,
age.
so you need to be alive. So yes, I represent aspiration and I represent a future for you, Eric.
Thank you.
What I want to ask is, when we were formulating this new constitution, taking into consideration the fact that countries where you have a Senate, which is often referred to as the upper house, they have distinct powers that guarantee that there are certain things that they only can do over and above ensuring that the lower house doesn't just go around doing what they do.
Yes.
How on earth did we get to the point where a constitution was passed and the Senate was rendered almost toothless?
That's where I am.
I'll tell you.
And that's why I was
you've asked that
judging
question.
I was actually basing that question on the fact that currently what we have is a Senate that is not an upper house, that does not have many things that it can do in terms of oversighting the lower house. So you're not an upper house.
I'll put it this way. We are indeed the upper house. And I can tell you two times or two occasions that really made the president understand that the Senate is indeed the upper house. Division of revenue bill, when we stalled it. The second occasion, which is coming up in March this year, is a formula on shareable revenue. The previous one was on the issue of the elections law, which in fact some people had to be airlifted to come and vote for it. Some people put off their phones and disappeared. And they were called or asked, "Where the hell are you?" I'm here. They send a chopper to pick them up so that they can come and vote. The problem, going back to Muga, the problem is that, and this is what I'm afraid will happen with the BBI, is that when we are sitting down and talking about what we want Kenya to look like for the future generation, when the room heats up so fast, the first thing, the only thing that we end up focusing on is on either a presidential or a parliamentary system. We now care so much about the president, and we don't give a hoot in hell about everything else that supports that presidency. This is where I see BBI heading. We're not talking about the issue of making the Senate the true upper house, where you either give it original jurisdictions on legislation, meaning you draft a piece of legislation, you go through it. Once you're satisfied that it has gone through the first, second, third reading, it has been voted for by at least 24 delegations, because we vote on delegations. We have 47 delegations. Narok County is one delegation. Narok Senator has that vote. My vote is very, very important. Nominated senators don't add up anything, really, to tell the truth.
In fact, they don't influence you at all.
They don't influence at all. At the end of the day, it is that delegation, the senator who has been elected by the people. If we give the Senate that power to be able to draft legislation, debate the legislation, and then send it directly to the president for it to be assented into law, then we will say we've given it the power that it should have to become the upper house. Currently, when you look at Article 110 of the Constitution, it is highly misinterpreted by the lower house in terms of the money bills. And if there are advisories from the Supreme Court, opinions that they say, like, it doesn't matter which bill you look at.
Explain it for people who may not understand exactly how this money bills process goes.
You see, the National Assembly, the National Assembly deals with the budget.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you look at everything to do with money, when they come up with a budget, they allocate money to different sectors. When you come up with a piece of legislation that now requires money to be allocated, it has to originate from the National Assembly. Because they're the ones who are looking at the issue of the budget. They're the ones who have all the money. For us, we concentrate on the issues of the county governments. We have something called the CARA, County Revenue Allocation Bill, which once we have the division of revenue, once the money has been divided between the two levels of government, which is the national government and the county government, we now take the portion that has been allocated to us using a formula given to us by the constitutional body, Commission of Revenue Allocation. We now then allocate that money based on different parameters. That is what we are tasked. That's your job. That is our job as a Senate. Now, the importance of the Senate is really to ensure accountability, a fiduciary responsibility. We are sending a lot of money to the counties. We want to ensure that this money is utilized properly. The problem we have currently is that the money which is sent to the national government, the National Assembly does not do their job to ensure that that money is equally utilized properly. And that is why you end up seeing there are so many supplementary budgets to try and correct where money has been borrowed. Why do you allocate money to a third studio that you don't have? And then later you realize that you've spent all the money in this one studio. So now you do a supplementary to remove the money that you had allocated to the other one so that you can be able to fund your operation.
These are the questions we ask, Senator, and sometimes we are left at a loss because we also don't understand how this works.
Kenyans need to understand this, that the Senate does a very, very important job. One, it oversights on the counties. Number two, it protects the interest of those counties. In the case of Mike Sonko, because it's important for us to talk about it, I'm one of those who still believe that Mike Sonko is still the governor of Nairobi County. And Mike Sonko is still innocent until proven guilty. We have the courts which are tasked with that duty of going through the evidence presented by the DPP. Do I support that you should step aside when you've been charged with a matter of corruption? Yes, I do. But what we need to do, we need to amend the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act.
So that
what can happen?
Currently, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act discriminate between a public officer and a state officer. Because a public officer is appointed by the president. The appointing authority has got the power to tell them, you have been charged with corruption, step aside. A state officer is elected by the people. Mike Sonko was elected by 850,000 people. Okay, it is wrong for one person to tell him to step aside. If we agree, and I'm from the school of thought that believes that if the moment you are charged with corruption, and there is substantive evidence, you should step aside. But what should you do? Number one, if we have a law that discriminates it, it behooves us, members of parliament, and members of parliament include senators and members of the National Assembly. Because to be honest with you, a member, and if you ask my brother here, he will tell you an MP is a person who is in the law house. An MP is also a senator. So it is just that he's a member of the National Assembly, he's a member of the Senate. Because if you look at my card, it says Ledama Olekina, Senator Ledama Olekina, MP.
So that it just
so there are two issues here for me to demystify it. We must put it in line with the law. We always say the law is an
What should the law say? Just getting
the
into
law.
it.
If we all agree with the DPP, if we all agree with the rule of justice,
the principle of stepping aside.
Actually, if we all agree with the principle of a fiduciary responsibility, then let us amend the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act and clearly state that the moment you are sent to court and there is allegation of misappropriations of funds, these are the steps which should take place in terms of you stepping aside. In the case of Nairobi, the first thing which should have happened is that now that you've been accused of corruption and you've been taken to court, first of all, it was wrong for Mike Sonko to be arrested the way he was arrested.
How should he have been arrested? That would have been a better show of justice per
just
se.
Call him, tell him you
Please
need to appear here. Come to DCI.
He had been prison. He had
been going. He had been going. It is all drama. It is ridiculous. It is all drama.
He had answered questions.
You know? So you come in and you're told now you're under arrest. But you don't. So that's number. Let me go back to the issue.
So you're saying
I don't want to lose.
Don't follow him across the country and make an arrest.
Don't follow him across the country. No, don't. Don't use a lot of public resources to go. Just call the guy and say, look, summon the guy. Appear here.
We'll give you 24 hours.
We'll give you 24 hours to
the nearest police station.
To the nearest police station. Then if he fails to do that, then by all means, declare him a fugitive. And and go after him. So I don't want to lose this point.
Yes.
So number one, amend the act. That's very clear, so that it is equal. A state officer and a public officer, they all share the same
fiduciary responsibility.
Charge,
step aside.
Step aside. So in the case of Mike Sonko, what you do is that once he's been charged, yes, he steps aside, but there is a clear process of who takes over. In fact, Article 189 of the Constitution talks about corporations between the two levels of government.
Yeah.
It is wrong for certain people, including certain governors, to presume that the president can appoint somebody to go there and stand on for Mike Sonko. It is wrong for the Jubilee Party to believe that they can appoint somebody to go there and become the acting governor. It is wrong. It is not sound in law. If you have a piece of legislation, if you have the constitution, follow it to the letter. You cannot. Just the fact that I was sponsored by ODM, if today I'm charged and I'm taken to court, ODM has no legal, moral or legal basis to say we are now appointing so-and-so to be the acting senator. They can't.
Because they didn't appoint you.
They didn't elect me. I was elected by the people.
Yeah.
So let us make it correct. Let us amend the act so that it is proper. Number one.
Number two?
Number two, we have the issue of the deputy governor. I am already in court. In fact, my hearing is on the 20th. I took the matter to court because I strongly believe that these other arms of governments, which are part of, or like the national government, like Treasury, the Auditor General, and also the Control of Budget, should recognize, and also the members of the CEC, the CECs in the counties must recognize the powers of the deputy governor. Okay? But now, if you look at Kiambu and you look at Samburu, what is happening in those two counties is that the CECs don't care about the deputy governor.
You can't fire me anyway.
You can't fire. That's true. I cannot fire you. But
I should respect
you know,
your the
you must
authority of your
respect.
office.
You must respect the authority because Article 175, I think, of the Constitution is very clear on when the governor is absent, who takes over. 179, sorry,
who
179.
acts.
Who acts? Okay, so you cannot interpret it. I had a big issue with my colleague, the deputy speaker, when he interpreted it absent as being. He brought in the word objectivity.
Yeah.
You know, objectively absent. You can't. Absent is absent. Black is black. You're not there
You're
by
not
the
there.
fact that you've been sent to court. But you see what he was guarding against, and this is where I normally say, our own personal interest should not supersede the interest of the nation.
Unfortunately,
You know,
that is what the sentiment is, Senator.
And it is
then
wrong.
A lot of times,
and I
the
don't agree with it.
A lot of times, the sentiment coming from the people is that, legislators, people in positions of leadership are going to protect themselves,
Very
and that
true.
personal interest
Very true.
overrides the interests of the people whom actually should be the ones in positions of
Very
being
true. I
protected.
agree with you.
But this is the thing, and it seems like in cases like this that you all will do everything you can to protect one another as opposed to
I
the
don't
people.
believe that. I don't believe that. I come from a different school of thoughts. You know, I'll call black black when it is black, and white white when it is white, regardless of the consequences. So I think, but at the same time, all is not lost. I think there is a crop of young legislators who are now coming up and thinking and saying, "Listen, guys, we need to do what is right." You know.
Mutula Kilonzo Jr. I consider Mutula Kilonzo Jr.
He's a fine
legislator.
gentleman. He's,
I consider
you know,
Kipchumba Murkomen a young legislator.
Yes.
I don't know how many others you're talking about. Ledama, Olekina, and others. Well,
No, go ahead. I
it's
know where you're going with this.
It's
Right.
late
Go
when
on.
you tell me that there's a new batch of
Who are doing things differently.
younger legislators who are doing things differently, and then we still see them doing things the other way around.
Define
And
young.
age.
It's not age. It is young in the practice.
Young in practice.
Yes.
Young
he could
in school of
have.
thought.
He could come in, and
the
he's
first
probably
time.
older than me, and then, but he would be new.
Inexperienced.
He would be new.
I've actually been given an honorary status of
There you go.
youth.
But
You're
are
a
they-
young.
Yeah,
even
you
if
know,
they're young
and
in
which
the
is good.
practice, even
You know,
if they-
because you can be young in practice and young in age. You can be young in age, but you can be a sycophant.
But are they doing things
Okay.
differently? And I think that's the point that Eric was
And
bringing
I think,
up. is that
no.
we-
I think the thing is, I'll put it this way. I believe, and I remember Tupac Shakur for saying this. You know, we ride together, we die together. You know, was it Tupac Shakur or who
Is
was
that
it?
the motto?
You
Is
know.
that the motto
No.
amongst the senators, for
Right or
example?
No, I'll put it this. You know, if we are bad boys, we are bad boys for life.
Yeah.
You know, because what it is that for me, I'm an extremist when it comes to freedom.
That was
and
biggie,
liberty.
actually, then.
You know, for me, I am. You know, and this year I have clearly stated, very clearly, that I will be a radical for the truth, regardless.
You'll
You know,
push the envelope.
I will push
I
the
know you're going
envelope.
to go into the hour, so I will
It's
not raise
about,
the
about
que-
2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes.
You can ask it, then you
Let
can come
me
and
ask the
respond.
question, Mheshimiwa. I had begun a statement by saying that you present yourself as a very ardent supporter of your community and the people in your community.
Yes.
But this support has often lent itself to criticism that you are anti certain people within your community. Again, what do you say?
I'll put it this way. My community is everyone who subscribes to equality, equity. Everyone who comes in, I have qualified my sentiments and my interpretation of my community by inviting my dear sister here from Nigeria. She comes in, she lives there. She makes sure that
Buy
everyone,
some 5 acres from you.
you know, buys 5 acres from me, use it as agricultural land. Okay? Because she cares about the person downstream. Okay? That's number one. Number two, I can never take away the fact that I'm Maasai. And my interest, I have to defend those people who have no idea what this modern world is bringing to them.
Against the backdrop
You know,
of
listen,
the backdrop of being Kenyan at the end of the day.
I don't know if I'm Kenyan really, because I would be honest with you. Because if Miguna is not Kenyan, if certain people are saying Miguna is Canadian, I mean, then you ask yourself, are you Kenyan at the end of the day? I think it appears that in this country you're only Kenyan when you dance a certain tune.
When certain people determine.
No, you are Kenyan. You are Kenyan whether you decide to seek another citizenship
or not.
You are Kenyan by birth. You know.
When
you can either be naturalized or you can be born. So really, I think at the end of the day, we all must come to realize that 2020 is going to be a very, very tough year. And I will be pushing certain pieces of legislation, and I hope that we can be able to implement them. I'm going to propose that you, Eric, you, my brother, and you, my sister, save 40% of all your earnings. Okay.
You're also coming for our money.
He hasn't finished what he's saying.
I'm going to save that.
I'll let you finish. Let's first take a look at traffic and get into the hour. So the senator will be telling us about the pieces of legislation that he'll be hoping to introduce to the Senate in this coming year. In this year, we're already in the year actually. It's coming up to 9 o'clock. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have Senator Ledama Olekina from Narok County, who is in the studio. He's been with us since 8 o'clock. We'll allow him to stay for about another 10 minutes, and of course we know he's a busy man. We'll let him go. It's 9 o'clock. Good morning. This is the Situation Room.
Better Mombasa Road, I think the early morning traffic has dissipated and everybody now is able to get well on their way into the city. Not so bad at all. End of the week very well. Jogo Road right around the roundabout towards town, also looking good getting into the city. Not many problems there. Things might actually pick up next week, but for now all is well. In industrial area, of course, Enterprise Road has opened after the construction that took place there, so we don't see the spillover to Jogo Road. Everywhere else in the city looks actually fantastic. Things have looked and opened up on Thika Road as well. And yes, everybody in the country is enjoying a happy Friday as far as traffic is concerned. Unless there's something that comes into play, let us know. SpiceFM.k or rather SpiceFMKE 0719-012-600 is the number to call. The horse is gone. All is well. All is good. You get where you're going in good time this Friday morning.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Narok Senator Ledama Olekina wants us to save 40% of our income. Explain.
Yes, I do. We talk about wanting everybody to have affordable housing. We talk about wanting everyone to have a good healthcare system in this country. But we always get it wrong. The president currently has it wrong in terms of his housing that he wants to build.
Housing fund.
The Big Four agenda is completely wrong because it's not founded in practicality. We need to ask ourselves, and this is why I completely detest the introduction of other taxes. You know, there's always no taxation without representation. There's no reason as to why I should be paying a fuel levy, yet there are potholes on the road. So what we want to do is that, and this is not an NSSF. This is completely different, because people will argue, and I'm sure my brother will say NSSF has not done this. In fact, what they've done is that they've ended up just buying land and building their own places.
Right.
What I want is that I want Kenyans to be able to have affordable housing. This 40% proposal that I'm making should enable you to be able to afford a mortgage. And the fact that you are working, you have a job, you're contributing 40%, that should be your security in you being given a mortgage. If you look at a country like Singapore, and I want you to read a lot of the theories of Lee Kuan Yew. 75% of Singaporeans live in government housing. 75%. They save 50% of their income. In fact, they contribute 25% and the employer puts in 25%. When you do that, you are also guaranteed affordable healthcare. Our healthcare in this country is pathetic. You were talking about NHIF earlier on, about them coming up with new rules which are bound to really just discriminate against other people. When you save this 40% of your income, you're provided with a mortgage which you can be able to afford. Those houses are built. The government can borrow from this kitty and pay you interest. When you retire, they calculate how much you have in this kitty, because you must retire at a certain age. When you get to 60-something, you don't become a burden to the state. You have your money, you're pensionable. You have the money there that you can be able to go and use it. So the reason why I'm pushing for this 40% is to ensure for two main things. One, healthcare, and number two, affordable housing.
Well, if we look at the Big Four agenda, and obviously it's something that the president has been harping on for a while now, and there was a renewed call for this on New Year's Day specifically, to say that all those who are included in this process to actually come together to get a little bit more serious about it. And everything we hear the other day with the inclusion of this new tax in terms of patriotism and statehood and nationhood, then we hear about NHIF in line with UHC, which health, of course, is one of the Big Four. And it seems to be the end all and be all for moving this country forward. So are we saying the plans, everything that has been put in place, everybody, all the included parties, etc., it will not work?
It will not work. It will not work. And I'll tell you why it will not work.
Is a puppet show?
Because my brother here already has a house. He will not feel comfortable contributing to a kitty that is providing a house for others. The 40% savings that I'm asking for is so that you, Eric, who probably does not have an apartment in Nairobi that you own, you, my dear sister, who does not have an apartment that you own, maybe you bought one, can be able to get a mortgage, and your security is your savings.
Your security is your savings.
The security is your savings. Muga doesn't need it. He probably has a big mansion in Runda or somewhere.
Voila.
You know,
He
I'm not literally.
He actually does have, but
Okay.
well,
Let me finish.
It is clear to me that the
You've been
Honorable
profiled.
Mheshimiwa is a prophet.
Okay,
Carry on.
so the reason why this does not work is the way the president and the people who came up with the idea of everybody contributing to that national housing is because you are contributing to it, and it doesn't.
So how different
benefit you
is
directly.
your
Mine is very
fund
different
from
because
what we currently have? The
mine is
president's
very
fund?
different. The only thing that it requires is that you, as a citizen of this country, must own a home. You must own a home. So if you already own a home, you don't have to tap into your savings
So it's still
to use
voluntary.
it. It's no. It is mandatory to save 40%. We want to make it mandatory for you to save 40%. We want to do away with this issue of fundraising.
Can I tell you,
Regardless of
can I tell you the
age.
first question that Kenyans are going to ask
Yes,
you?
yes, tell
You're
me.
telling me to take away 40% as it is.
Yes.
What I have, I'm not able to
Yes,
juggle. I'm
yes,
not able
yes,
because
yes.
the cost of living rises every
Yes,
minute.
yes.
If there's not one national disaster, there's another.
Yes.
If there's not one tax, there's another. If there's not one issue, there's another.
Yes.
We entered into the year and school fees have increased.
Yes.
The cost of transportation higher and higher.
Yes.
The cost of food every December rises. expenses. Then you're saying take 40%.
40.
Take 40%
Yes.
for a house that
Now, let me
is it
answer.
a pipe dream?
No, let
the
me answer
question
that
then is
question.
how am I going to be able to survive?
To survive on the other
when
issue.
on the 100%, I was
I'm
not able to
surviving.
make it.
The reason why you're not able to survive with 100% right now is because of the level of debt that we have. In this case, when you look at countries that have succeeded, you might call it socialism or whatever you want to call it. But when you look at countries that have succeeded in instilling discipline of savings among its citizens, they don't borrow from outside. So the cost of living is down. The reason why we overtax in this country is because we have to pay the SGR, we have to pay the IMF. We want to be in a position where we do not have to borrow from outside. And the money that the government is borrowing from you is paying interest on that money. So your 40% savings will continue generating interest.
So it's a key
now,
that the government can dip its hand in.
it can dip its hand in, but it stops borrowing from outside. The reason why we're borrowing, let me tell you why I voted for the raising of the 9 trillion.
Yeah, raising the ceiling.
Raising the ceiling is because when I sat down, and I lived in the US, and there was a period of subprime loans, and where even at that point I couldn't afford a house. I bought a house in Concord, Massachusetts, which was about maybe $600,000. I couldn't afford that, but the money was there, was being given to me. Kenya cannot afford the loans that it's taking from foreign countries. The only way that I survived is when the Obamacare came in, and I was able to do what? To refinance the house with a lower interest rate.
Okay.
So now when I looked at my situation then, and I looked at the situation that this
Kenya
country
has,
is in, then I was convinced. I spoke to Raila about it, and I said, I'm not going to vote for this. I said, I will not vote for this. And then he convinced me and said, listen, the reason why we want to do this is because of two things. One, we have loans that were borrowed at 9% interest. 12% interest. I said, send me the detail. I was sent the list of all those loans. And I was convinced that the moment we raise the debt ceiling, we can now be allowed to refinance.
To borrow cheaper.
No, not to borrow cheaper. To refinance.
Refinance the same.
Get rid of all the commercial loans. Okay? Because you see, the reason why we could not be able to borrow or be able to even to pay is that we've reached the ceiling. So even refinancing it is not possible. So when you raise the debt ceiling, you can now refinance, get rid of the 12% expensive loans and borrow.
commercial loans.
Can I tell you the second question that will be asked?
Yes.
Previously, there's been a pot, obviously known as the National Treasury, where money has been gotten basically to run the country.
Yeah.
Now it's been riddled, unfortunately, with corruption. In many cases, time and time again. Infrastructure Project 1, Infrastructure Project 2, we don't see the money. Ghost projects that we don't see. Now you want to tell the people of Kenya to remove money from their pockets and give the government. The speculation will be rife in terms of what will happen with this money based on historical experiences with what has happened with public funds.
History is very important because we learn from it. Moving forward, we introduce the death penalty for corruption. Number 2,
we've often said,
come and go and be shot. Listen, no. We instill discipline. Let me tell you, God willing, when I'm president of this country.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Okay, discipline will be the order of the day.
That was going to be actually the final question of this interview.
In fact, right now, I support the DPP 100% when he talks about the introduction of body cams to the police.
Yep.
I want to introduce a piece of legislation to support him and ensure that, Eric, you're driving your nice car. You have a camera.
There must be cameras on the dashboard.
So that if you decide that you are too important than the person in front of you, that camera can be able to show you and stop you from overlapping. The reason why we have traffic in this country is because we overlap. That's number one. The reason why we have traffic in this country is because the taxman has increased the taxes so high on new vehicles such that everybody is benefiting from dumping from China, from Japan, from all these countries that are dumping their 8-year-old cars to us. Ask yourself, why do we as Kenyan always drive junks? Why do we drive old cars that they're new to us? When we are not human beings?
We deserve better.
Okay, the Ugandans and Tanzanian drive even
Worse.
Yes.
I know, because you see, we are well. I mean, this is a bigger economy than theirs. So I think slowly by slowly.
Yeah.
So when the trade minister, I think Munya, came up and said he wants to reduce the number of years you can import a car to 3. They were gun blazing, saying, "Well, you don't want us to afford cars." No. Kenyans, listen. What we're going to do is that we are going to reduce that to 2 years. But then what do we do? We do away with taxes, better taxes. We reduce the taxes. There's really no reason as to why we should be following this formula of your 16%, that is VAT, 25% excise duty, all these taxes. And you are saying, I'm buying a vehicle for $10,000. That's a million shillings. Then multiply by 16% VAT. Get the new total. Multiply by 35% value added, what do you call it? Excise duty. Multiply by 2.5% IDF. You take the new figure and the new figure to multiply. No! You're killing Kenyans. Okay? In other countries, like Singapore is an example. And the reason why I'm using Singapore as an example is because it's a country that has got nothing. Do you know how they create more land to build houses? They burn their trash so that they can use the ashes to reclaim land from the sea, because they can no longer get sand. Because their neighboring countries have told them, guys, you're taking all our sand. So now they're using an incinerator to reclaim more land. They have got nothing. Yet
they're invading the ocean.
IMF, let me tell you, yeah, you can put it that way. The IMF can now borrow from them.
It's the other way around.
No. The IMF borrows from Singapore.
A country.
I think CAT and I like this death penalty thing for corruption.
Yes, we put the death penalty.
City's eyes lit up when you mentioned that.
You mentioned it. Senator, we thank you very much for joining us this morning. Asante sana for the conversation that we've had. So you've told us that you want to be president in future. How many years? 2022, 27, 32, 37?
From 2027.
Okay.
2027.
Yes.
Okay. Presidential candidate, Senator Ledama Olekina.
But I'm a senator now. So
Yeah,
just
yeah,
call me
yeah,
senator now.
Senator.
Let me walk up. Let me walk
Walk up
towards
the
that.
ladder. Right.
All right. You only have about how many years? 27 minus 20.
7.
I have 7
It's
years.
been a mathematics course
This
today.
has been-
7 is a lucky number. I'm the
looking at this-
7th born
I'm
in my family.
Yeah, nice.
Seventh born.
7th born out of 14. From
You may
one
choose to
mother.
stay
That's a
behind
good
because
number.
CT Muga wants to introduce another topic here, which will look at our economic status of a country, employment and unemployment, and how that is affecting us as a society. You may choose to say, "Oh, now here you'll not be answering our questions; you'll be contributing as one of us." All right. This is a situation
I
of
have
it's
to go
Kenya's
and make
biggest
money.
conversation.
I sell milk, man.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I can actually be supplying you milk.
You should have come with milk.
Next time. We'll
Next
do.
time.
Actually,
All right.
no. Eric's putting
Sample.
it wrongly. Samples.
You'll
Actually,
bring-
samples.
Yes.
Yeah.
You pay for the samples.
No,
man.
no. You
Then
come
it
with.
stops being a
It's all
sample.
about the Benjamins.
Then it's not a sample.
Yes.
It's 9:15. This is the situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We've heard in the studio Senator Ledama Olekina from Narok County. He's told us about a number of things, of course. We know that you've been listening and you've been posting your comments on our social media platforms, Spice FM KE, Facebook, and Twitter at Spice FM KE. We'll invite you again to come and let's talk about legislation for this year. I didn't feel like we
It's a
adequately
mature
looked at the issue
debate,
of
and I really like it.
of the Senate and whether the Senate is important. Well, I believe that the Senate is important.
Thank
If we
you.
went back to the point where we had a committee of experts report, but the current constitution, the way it is structured, scrap this thing. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. 16
You
minutes
have to
past
get it
9
in
o'clock. Good morning.